on point 3 that we were looking at. And I think the last thing we said was even going back to the Old Testament, God instructed Israel to be different from ancient and Near East neighbors. In other words, we were looking at the concept of earn all that you can, but not at the expense of your neighbor, like not taking advantage of somebody. Now, if you grab your Bible, we have 3 different scripture verse passages that we're going to look at. So can someone, no, I'm past there, where we are. Right here we are. All right, if someone can look up Leviticus chapter 25, verse 17. Someone else want to grab Proverbs chapter 22. And then someone else want to grab Exodus chapter 2. Who has Leviticus 25, verse 17 that would like to read it? Jackson?
Leviticus 25:17. You shall not therefore oppress one another, but thou shalt fear no God, for I am the Lord your God.
All right, so Israel is commanded not to oppress one another. One of the greatest ways we oppress each other is taking advantage of people financially, or as the Bible calls it, usury. What do we call usury? Interest, all right? Now, if you have a loan, you have interest, whatever. Like, I understand banks have to, but I'm just saying, what the scriptures teaches is that, hey, listen, don't oppress each other. Don't take advantage of one another, right? The second one, Proverbs chapter 22. I see Daniel's hand. Yeah. Okay, again, you see, now this one is stepping outside the law. We're told, rob not the poor. Have you ever noticed that certain people that like give loans and credit cards, they tend to target the people who already are not making good financial decisions? You say, why? Because they know they're not making good financial decisions, so what's going to happen if they give them their product? They're probably not going to make good financial decisions, and they can make more money off of them with late fees and all this type of stuff. Anyone notice that? I have met very few wealthy people who actually have a balance on their credit card. Very few. I've met very few, like if there's a financial advisor that I've read a lot of his stuff, and he has a podcast and things of that nature. Now, a little bit different because he's in the U.S., so it's a little bit different economy and stuff here. But what's funny is he pays for everything in cash. Like every car he owns, all 20 of them, they're all paid for in cash. They just he got sick of hiring large civic centers and coliseums to host his teaching sessions and conferences in. So guess what he did? He built his own conference center and paid, you guessed it, cash. So when the conference center was done, this massive project, his debt was nothing. And people come by the thousands and all pay. And guess what? None of their money is going to pay off a debt. It just goes straight into the bank. Rob not the poor, all right? Exodus chapter 2. 22, probably. Then it's probably 22. Let's see. There you go. Well, if you found it, you want to read it?
If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbour's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goes down. For that is his covering only, it is his raiment or his skin, wherein he only sleep. And it shall come to pass, when he crieth unto me, that I will hear, that I am
Do you hear what was Israel said? Hey, if thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, what? Thou shalt not be to him as an user. And he said, he went as far as saying, like, if you take his cloak, as like a down payment, as a deposit. Yes? What did it say? Don't keep it. Give it back to him before the sun goes down. He kind of needs it on to wear it so he doesn't be cold. Do you kind of get the idea? And in both Proverbs and Exodus, what does God say? If you take advantage of the poor, who takes note of that? God. And it doesn't sound like he takes note of it in a way of like, ooh, good job. Right? Nor does it sound like he takes note of it, oh, so if you make more money, that means your tithe goes up. None of that is stated there, right? It's as God does not look poorly on that. Matter of fact, in that transaction, whose side does God take? The poor person is being taken advantage of. Okay, so we need to keep these types of things in mind because that is not the way of thinking in the world in which we live. The world in which we live is, he's making some dumb decisions. I bet I can make some money off of him. I'll help him make some more. Isn't that what salesmen do? Have you ever had a salesman try to talk you into, like say you're buying a car? When we were buying a car, I'd go on to a used car lot looking at cars, and the first question they ask you is, what's your budget? Right? And I told them, this is my budget. The first car they take me to was within that budget. But then he says, but if you're able to stretch that just a couple thousand more, I can put you into this. Right? And guess what this is? This is a lot nicer than that. And they kept doing that to me. And I looked at them and said, no, this is my budget. But you know what? The minimum loan you could take out from us is about $5,000. And with what you can do and $5,000, you could get into like this car, has 140,000 kilometers, but this car only has about 80. If you just take out a $5,000 loan. And I'd look at them and say, no, if I can't pay cash for it and drive off, I won't drive off with it. And they looked at me and said, but that's weird. And I said, yes, that may be weird, but I can afford that. And I'm telling you this, if I get that $5,000 loan, I won't be able to afford to pay that part back. And he said, oh, but it's not a lot of money. I said, it may not be to you, but when I look at my budget, it's not there. Oh, but it's okay. You could just do a little bit of overtime. I looked at him and said, you're paid for what? He said, just work some more hours. I'm like, you don't know how pastoring works, do you, buddy? I could work 80 hours or I could work 20 hours. Guess what? Same pay. It doesn't change anything. And he goes, well, that doesn't seem right. I'm like, it is what it is, man. Like, so this is what it is, and I'm not going to do it. And he's like, but you know how much effort he spent trying to talk me into? And here was the funny thing. He said, well, if you don't want to take out 5,000, how about we take out 12 and spread the payment to make it a smaller payment over 5 or 6 years, then I can get you into a new car. I remember looking at him going, if I can't afford the $5,000 loan, what makes you think I'm going to go up to 12 to 15? And he goes, but it's a nicer car. I'm like, yes, it is a nicer car. But that nicer car is for somebody else, not for me. And he goes, I'm not going to convince you. No, you're not going to convince me. And he's like, okay. So you're leaving here without a car? I'm like, yep, I'm leaving here without a car. You don't know how many times I had that conversation until finally we got to the one and he looked at me and he said, how much is your budget? I told him how much the budget was. He goes, that right there. And I looked at it and he goes, you got 3 other under your budget, but that one, and we looked at them all and he goes, okay. And guess what was the funny thing is? He tried to increase it with a loan and I told him my reasoning. He goes, I respect that. That's very wise. More people would do much better. He goes, but then again, I wouldn't make as much money. And I said, right. Why don't you make your money off somebody else? Because this is what's going to happen. And then he looked at me and he said, well, why don't you do that? And I thought, this is great. I said, because the Bible teaches the debtor is slave to the lender, and I don't like being a slave. I said, and number two, it warns about usury. And number three, you might want to read this. It talks about not taking advantage of the poor. And by trying to get me to get a loan out, guess what you're trying to do? He's like, are you poor? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Probably not by the world standards, but like, he looks at me and goes, and all that's in the Bible? And I'm like, yeah, it's all in the Bible. He goes, I guess I didn't read it well. And I'm like, you might want to go back and read it. And he's like, yeah, but I can't do that. And I'm like, why? He goes, it would ruin my business. I said, fair enough, fair enough. But do you get the idea? Hey, when we honor God by honoring others, it's amazing how God's blessings flow. When you just honor, how you honor God? By honoring others, by not taking advantage of the poor, by not oppressing people, by not doing that types of stuff. But here's the other thing. On the other side, don't spend more than you got. I mean, it's simple logic. If you look at something and it goes, this is the monthly repayment, this is the rent, this is the whatever, and you go, I can't afford that, but you know what? I'm going to sign it anyway. That's not a smart thing. All right? That's just as bad as the other side going, I'm going to make some money off them. It's just bad either way, all right? Don't do it. All right? Now, God tells us to live for the audience of one. You may look at me and say, hey, but if you do that, you're never going to get through in life. You're never going to make money in life. Guess what? I don't care what your opinion is. I'm not trying to be mean, but you shouldn't care what everyone's opinions are. You should be able to go, hey, what does God think? And if that's what God thinks, even if it's contrary to popular belief, that's what I'm going to do. Okay? Money may give you more likes and follows, but it will never fulfill you. We live in a digital age, don't we? Everyone wants to like, everyone wants to follow. And you know what? When you put that new car up, you get a lot of likes. Oh, wow, and you get a lot of comments. But guess what? Money may do that for you, but it will never fulfill you. When you lose it all, will the fans and likes still be there? Answer that question. Hey, if I have all this money and everyone likes me now and everyone, shares my post and everyone gives me thumbs up and everyone comments on it, what happens when you lose all your money? Are those same people still liking, following, sharing, or have they gone, ew, unfollow? More than likely, it's unfollow. It's not going to help you. A love for God and a love for neighbor should be the basis for how Christians earn and spend money. The means through which we earn an income is more important than the money earned itself. How you earn it is just as important as the money you earn. If you did not earn it respectably, guess what? How you earned it is just as important. If you earned it by robbing the poor, guess what you've just done? You may have earned money here, but you've also earned an enemy. Right? Because God's warned against that. So, think about that. If you truly believe that everything belongs to God, do you think God will bless dishonest gain? But isn't that the principle that we've already looked at? Like everything we have is God's. We're just stewarding it. So if everything belongs to God, do you think God will bless and be happy with dishonest gain? You may go, yeah, but if I gain, I'll give more. Can I say something? If you aren't giving before you gain, you won't give when you gain. I've had people tell me, well, if I make $1 million, I'll tithe on that. Here's my question. Are you tithing now? No, I'm not. Guess what? When you make $1 million, you still won't then. You won't do then what you don't do now. It's that simple. Right? I'll be generous if I have money. No, you won't. You'll still be stingy. Because you're stingy when you don't have money. You're going to be stingy when you do have money. It's just that simple. That's just how it works. Money doesn't make you a better person. Money actually magnifies what's already there. Right? Proverbs chapter 13, verse 11. We'll end this time with that, and we'll get to number 4 sometime. Next week, yeah, maybe. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 11. It says, wealth gotten by vanity shall be dismissed, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. There's a New Testament verse that would also state that. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't. So it's not just Old Testament. Hey, you know what? If you're gonna, as you look at that, wealth gotten by vanity will diminish, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. You know what that means? You want to increase? Work for it. Don't expect it to be handed to you. Hey, nothing in life that is really free. You may say, oh, but, I get this free money from the government. No, that's not free money. You know where that came from? And I'm not against that type of stuff. Hey, if you qualify for it, go for it. You know what I'm saying? But it's not free. Someone else paid taxes, right? Oh, we have free health care. No, you don't. Have you ever filed your income taxes? There's a Medicare levy. If you have private health cover, it's a smaller levy. If you don't have private health cover, it's a bigger levy. But guess what? You pay money. But I don't earn that much, so I don't pay that much. Yes, but someone else does. Nothing in life is free. And if someone tells you it's free, go, what's the catch? Because there always is a catch. You say, why? You generally in life have to earn what you get. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the practice. You have to. I've known a few guys that have actually played professional sports, and I was talking to one of them, and I said, hey, I looked at him and I said, you know what? You like this sport, I like this sport. We've played it together. And I asked him jokingly, I said, now, if you just saw the difference in us, the answer was obvious. Dude was 6'8", and probably 150, 160 kilos, but he was like, boom. He played an offensive lineman in professional football, gridiron. So he was that big guy. And I had said, I like playing gridiron as well. We've played together some flag football games and stuff. I said, what's the difference between you and me? Why are you professional and why do I not have a chance? He looked at me, smiled, and laughed. And he said, the obvious answer is the size difference. He goes, but you want to know what the real answer is? And I said, what's that? He goes, before you ever got up, I'd already put in 4 hours in the gym. Before you ever set foot on the field, I'd already been practicing for 3 hours. He said, I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked harder than anyone else in the weight room, and I worked harder than anyone else on the field, and I worked harder than anyone else around me, and that is why I got to where I was. I had to work for it. And I looked at him, and he goes, and if you look at my diet and look at your diet, you'll notice a difference. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, you're right. I'm not willing to sacrifice that much. It's not worth that much to me. And he's like, that's okay. That's good. Then he looked at me and he said, but, he said, I could ask you, why is it when you preach, you know the Bible more than I ever do? And he goes, how much do I want to bet? That, well, I was up maybe before you in the gym, before you ever would consider going to the gym, you had already been spending time in the Bible before I ever cracked mine. And I looked at him, he looked at me and he said, it goes both ways. If you want to know something, put in the work. If you want to do something, put in the work. Guess what he didn't realize? He was quoting Proverbs chapter 13 before he ever even knew it existed. Right? He was quoting, books, verses in the New Testament before he knew they existed. So, there we are. We'll stop there.